Hello, it's me again, Dr. Dasher. Uh, let's resume a discussion about the early um, introduction to developmental psychology. I won't review in any of these small lectures because I'm sure you understand what we've already covered. I want to talk about a few considerations among some other things and move on from there. Um, and if you hear repetition, that's that's very good because it'll aid you in remembering this stuff. So, considerations. What are these? Nature, nurture, a biggie. Nature, nurture. As a matter of fact, you can't really overexpress the importance of nature, nurture, and the other two items I'm going to discuss this morning. I might not even get beyond this particular section. So, nature, nurture. Nature, unlearned stuff, instinctual things. You're born with the instinct to survive, for example. You can be taught how to survive, but you're born with that instinctual nature. Anything that you do that nobody teaches you, that you are born with, that's nature. Nurture, that's learned behavior. So nature is unlearned, nurture is learned. Just as I mentioned, you have the motivation to want to survive. Now, we put you in situations, and by nurture, we teach you how to do that. I was a United States Marine. We were taught how to survive out in the field. Um, we were born with the motivation to survive, and then the Marine Corps taught us how to go about it in nasty situations. So, nature, nurture, bear those things in mind. They play a tremendous role in the developmental process, particularly on the horizontal scale. The next of our considerations, critical thinking. Let me interrupt myself. If you have questions about nature nurture, jot these down. Bring these to class. We'll discuss them, not in a lecture way, but in a learning way. Critical thinking, the next on our list. What is critical thinking? By now, if you're taking excuse me, a little cold here. By now, if you're taking developmental psychology, that means that you've had some lower level courses and you've hopefully been introduced to critical thinking. What is it? It's thinking beyond yourself. We all have biases. I'm not talking about racism and things, although you have to include those. Biases, things that we think are the correct way to do stuff, etc. Critical thinking asks you to remove that attitude, remove yourself, take yourself out of the equation long enough to analyze information that you're being presented. So if I'm talking to you about something and it goes against what you've been taught within reason, then if you are employing critical thinking, then without reservation, without defensive attitudes, you will listen to what's being presented with a bit of skepticism, healthy skepticism, which is telling you basically just because you hear something doesn't mean it's correct, or you have to compare what you're hearing to what you already know. So you're not really doing away with your attitudes, understandings, etc. What you're doing is hearing a different side of that. And then you still make decisions. If I make a decision to remain in the status quo of my beliefs and values, etc., that doesn't mean I didn't think critically. It just means that I made a choice to remain thinking the way I think. But thinking critically allows me to explore other ways of thinking about a particular subject. Hope that's not confusing. If it is, here's another chance for you to jot that down and bring it to class, and we'll discuss it further. more deeply than we are here. And then the last thing on the considerations list, perception. Wow. Your perceptions come from nurture. You're taught perceptions. I'm not talking about the perception. Well, maybe I am. I was going to bring up the word fear. That is a perception, but it's based on instinct. Fear in the perception realm falls under nurture. And the reason it does is because, am I born with the ability to be fearful? Absolutely. Do I know what to fear? Nope. Your two fears that are present at birth are uh, uh, fear of falling and fear of sudden loud noises. So these two things you're born with. Everything else is taught to you. You don't know not to pick up a black widow spider. Somebody has to teach you that. Or try to pet a rattlesnake, or in our part of the country, a copperhead. Somebody has to tell you not to do that. It hurts you. It's harmful. And we won't get into the anthropological background, the biopsychological stuff that relates to that. But that's briefly what perception is. Things that I've been taught, and I have a view of those things that is important to my well-being. So I thought I'd be spending more time on that, but there's a lot more time to be spent on it. But I'll carry that over to class if we can. Probably be the point of a discussion that we have there. Now, move on. Patterns of change. Patterns of change related to development. Basic concepts related to patterns of change. What do these involve? Well, some of these are pretty obvious. As you develop, things change. That's what we're saying here. And let's begin with physical development. I will not be going into super depth with these things. So these are the highlights. These are the things that are to be considered when you talk about physical development. The body, and all of us have been through this. The brain, sensory capacities, motor skills, health. All of these things are physically related developmental concepts. These things change via patterns. Cognitive development, learning, attention, memory, all together. Language, thinking, reasoning, creativity. Move backwards with me a moment. Reasoning and creativity. Thinking, reasoning, creativity. Kind of all in a little globe all their own in a way. My thinking, my reasoning, my creativity become more sophisticated with age, hopefully, if the developmental process is taking place. And we're not talking about did I get to go to college, or did I have to drop out of school in the 8th grade? We're not talking about that, which can greatly affect thinking, reasoning, and creativity. However, there have been some magnificent people who were not educated at a high level who can think, reason, and create at high levels. We all know about those folk. So thinking, reasoning, creativity, something that comes with development. Psychosocial development. By the way, if you want one word that plays a heavy role, and it's a good explanation of all this, you can use the word biopsychosocial. Biopsychosocial. That means biology, psychology, and sociology all rolled into one. So we move from physical to cognitive. Now we're talking about psychosocial development. What does that involve? Emotions, personality, social relationships. And I don't need to explain that sort of thing to you. This is life. This is how you get along with other people, or how you don't get along with other people. What are their influences on you? What are your influences on others? There's a word that I'll introduce you to later that talks about that. Reciprocal determinism, but don't write that down. That's not one word, it's two. So, psychosocial development, emotions, personality, social relationships, and then finally, to wrap that part up, all of the above, all of the things you've just heard are interrelated. They all work together in the developmental process. If you have questions, write them down, and we'll address them in our meetings. First meeting probably going to be pretty heavy duty because we're going to talk about a lot of things. I will be bringing some topics with me to class to introduce you to and divide you up into groups and have you address these things. So if you watch this video beforehand, then you'll be better prepared. If you don't, that's fine. I'll take care of you. That's what I'm supposed to do, and I love doing that. Okay, we'll wrap it up then with that bit of information, and I'll be talking to you again soon about periods of the lifespan. Take care.